Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Braz Takes. As I, deep dive into the LPL. Internationals, if one is coming up, and yes, Rift Rivals coming up in very soon, actually. It is June 21st as of this moment, and it starts at July the 4th. Goddamn, all right. So we're already getting to a position where Rift Rivals is coming up in the very foreseeable future. So you know what that means. Next week will be an episode completely dedicated to Rift Rivals. I'll hold all my opinions and all my points. We still have one more team to flesh out and see how they'll do. Because currently, my God, I'm really leaning towards LCK. I am. We just need to be able to see what Invictus Gaming, JD, even Top Esports has to offer. Top Esports still hasn't faced a top-tier team in the LPL. That's something that I really need to see because Top Esports, last time we saw them in a really competitive environment when the spotlight was shining on them, was, they weren't able to deal with it. And I'm sure that was in a playoff time where they went up against Invictus Gaming, but some of the members really came out flat on that one. And a lot of the strategy wasn't really catered towards dealing with Invictus Gaming. And when they went up against FPX in the third place match, to me, even was even worse. That being said, I think our LPL teams are all, or at least for our top 5 LPL teams at this point in time, are actually just insane. And I think haven't seen as competitive or as strong of a split that we are currently about to see. That's another point of discussion we'll have later on in the show. So, focus. In a week's time, we'll talk about Rift Rivals, what it means, what we'll get out of it, and we'll have a little bit more information when it comes to how Invictus Gaming are currently looking. But I'll talk about one thing. Start this one off by talking about LGD. Man. So, when you make episode 1 of a show like this, you think, all right, the first episode, throw out all your hot takes, get them all out of your system. Episode 2 is going to be absolutely worse. The content will just be a little bit more focused on the week to week. Maybe you can find a new point to actually discuss on about a team strength and all that. But you get hit with news, stories like this, especially ones around Condi, a player as prolific as him. When you think LPL history, you really do think of moments where Condi does shine. 2017 spring, going up against RNG, WE versus RNG in the finals. Guess who wins that one? WE. Guess who gets that finals MVP? Condi. Goes to MSI. Goes to Worlds. Semi-finalist at Worlds. Big moment for him. Loses to the eventual winner. Champions. And Condi, to me, of course, he was the person that innovated with the Jungle Ezreal. Of course, a lot of people ended up picking that up around the world, but he was a person that was incredibly creative, played a centered style where Team WE could focus around him. And then when he went to LGD, suddenly, LGD finally had a jungler that had an immense amount of experience, commanded attention, and commanded, decision-making, strong decision-making, shot calling, all of that. So that's something that LGD, to be honest with you, never had. From Twen, from Amy, Intruder, a lot of junglers going through those doors. And all of them really were junglers that, while most of them were facilitators, they're facilitators that had to be led, that didn't have a strong base to work off of, and didn't have the experience, certainly, to be confident in. So those were issues that I felt that LGD has had in the past, and they had resolved them in the last year. Think about the last year for LGD. LGD picked up UDJ, got Kramer after picking up Y4. 2 big pickups. I'm just talking about the AD carry position. Because when they got Y4, I was like, great. Wonderful. Coming in from RNG, had a lot of highs to his name. Then they lose him. I was like, well, that sucks. You lost both Jinnu and Y4. How are you going to recover? They said, actually, we're fine. Not only do we have Lies in the top lane that we ended up moving towards Doran, and we'll see what ends up happening on the top side of the map, but they focused all on the bot side of the map where they were able to get Kramer, RD came and stationed himself on the bottom side of the map. So, that 2v2 has been working out well for themselves. While they have Condi and Yuki as a 2v2 through mid. If this team has more minutes alongside each other, more experience alongside each other, this team works out really well. In fact, I remember I heard something from Kenny the Jet Smith when referring to the NBA back in the day about whenever you had teams that stayed together from one season to the next, the All-Star doesn't leave. It's because they thought in their minds, we don't microwave, we bake. We don't just expect to become a top-tier team in just 1 year's time. We really need time to gel and work it out. And I felt like with what we saw from LGD, especially last split coming together, they just needed time. They didn't need much changes at all. If there was ever going to be a change, I think top lane was going to be the lane in question. But that team needed time, and certainly they would find themselves back in the playoff. Man, their fan base is crazy too. Their fan base is just wild alongside them. LGD fans just want to see this team be able to come back on top and be competitive again. And I felt like we were getting that point. And then, of course, they get hit with that. And here's the news information is that Condi got hit with a 1.5 ban for match fixing. Now, we don't know much information whatsoever when it comes down to the source. Condi's Weibo makes a mention of NEST. But I always think that it's incredibly, reckless, irresponsible to talk about details that are not public and rely on rumors on a discussion like this that has heavy, criticism's one point, but more so just heavy consequences to the player and to the league. So for me, I see that situation. I say, well, Condi, we'll see. I think he recognizes, and this is my gut, I think he recognized whatever he did was, wrong, put himself in. And if I think LPL history, I think Condi, because I already made my points on that one, going through so much as a player, that by the end of the ban, which he'll be back in end of 2021, basically 2020, he's going to be completely gone. He'll be back by the beginning, of 2021. That I think he'll find himself. I think he'll land on a team. That's my take on it. I think a team will take a chance at him because that kind of IQ, jungle IQ, is certainly wanted, needed. But LGD now don't have that. Have to go to Quay. And while they had a strong performance versus FPX, that was largely because of the team that existed around him. That RD had some great moments where you're able to find picks. Kramer and Yuki certainly had good moments as well in that series. But it just wasn't enough. And I think that's always going to be the tail of the tape for LGD. A lot of the times it comes down to the fact that it just ain't enough for the team to be able to pick up wins when it counts. And while that was up against FPX, and I think people will look to that series and say there's hope, remember the circumstances of that victory for me is something that's very difficult to replicate. I didn't see them as a playoff team coming into the split. I think it's even worse now. Maybe we'll have to just look towards next year and see what ends up happening for this team. And sure, you can always kind of reference a miracle run for this squad, but I think that's for me out of question. There are way too many teams that were below them and slightly above them that have actually just drastically improved and had just the amount of time to work alongside each other than LGD did. So I still say LGD, they made the right changes coming into this split. They should be confident and happy with the path that they're paving. Finally, Hangzhou is going to be happy with, glad with the team that they have available in front of them. I think that's something to be excited about. Now, I'm going to continue to be negative on this subject because the next topics are going to be Team WE and Dominus. Now, Dominus I already talked about pretty heavily. I want to give the caveat, though, that the first 4 series that they had to deal with was EDG, IG, LNG, and Top Esports. What the hell? They had to face a whole slew of undefeated teams. All of them basically are strongest in the league. Invictus Gaming was their Dominus' closest set. And even then, you will never expect Dominus to be able to take that one. So those are the ones where you kind of and say that Dominus doesn't have to concern themselves or really put much attention into the result and just have to focus on growing. And I think I remember talking to one of the Chinese casters, and they make a mention of the idea of just like the mentality behind losing for the first 4 weeks, losing this much. Because whenever you find yourself, regardless of the opponents that you're dealing with, going into 4 weeks of just consistent losing, it doesn't feel good, obviously. It never feels good. Does the mentality keep intact? I find it difficult. You start to question too much about your own gameplay. Spring Split was the split where, Dominus had a continued focus on what was a group mentality, team fight mentality, consistent 5v5s that came through, and picks that whenever was available, they would cling on to. The Kai'Sa, Sion comes to mind, of course. And then we have the Lee Sin going in through the jungle, or right now he's feeling a lot more comfortable going back to his prior picks of Kindred in Italy. This is something that Dominus stake their name on, comes back. Sure, they look worse, and sure, the earlier points that I made coming into the split was that their solo lanes, specifically Changhong, needed to be able to level themselves up. And those are coming into reality. The last series that we saw Dominus go up against was Suning. Biu performed much better within the laning phase than outside of the laning phase. And that's the reality. That's the facts. Biu probably should have gotten 2 MVPs in that series. Right now, Changhong needs to be able to perform much better within the laning phase. But now, actually, just outside of the laning phase is even good and worse. Teams lacking coordination, which is actually very weird to see. And there's a lot that comes into play here. I hope that Dominus actually performs a little better, of course. I just want to see them at the last glory. I don't want to see them leveling down as a team. I think that's a danger that we're currently walking into. Now, the next series is not even just a must-win, it's a must-stomp. They must play out of their minds in this one. They have to prove to their fans, to themselves more importantly, that when they go up against Vici Gaming, that they're good enough to be able to take a 2-0, a clean one at that. Sure, Vici Gaming has pushed a lot of teams to the edge, but Dominus has a lot to prove to themselves that they are still a playoff team. And if they lose to Vici Gaming, if they get into a struggle, like if it doesn't look clean against Vici Gaming, then that's when you start calling it out, calling it quits. Sure, there's a long portion of this split to go, and it's only going to get easier for Dominus. But the reality is the teams that didn't make playoffs before, Suning in particular, BLG kind of, and I think that discussion will come into play what BLG actually looks like. These teams are keeping firm, getting better, and right now Dominus is doing the opposite. So we'll have to track to see what they can do going up against Vici Gaming. If the pieces come together, if they go back to playing through team fights, because flatly put, their 1-3-1 comps look bad. I saw that in the first split. They didn't play it as much, of course. They went back to the whole team fight mentality, tank top and group. But when they had that in game 1, I looked at that and I was like, whoa. Had a good early portion of that game, but of course could not finish because they ended up, of course, abandoning Sidewave. Got took out in the team fight. And you hate to see it happen. Then go on towards the next team, and of course, in a very similar fate. Now, Team WE is going to be an interesting one because Team WE is a team that, of course, were a former playoff team, much like Dominus. And a lot of people sang the praises because people expected Team WE to go far in playoffs. I did. Remember, in playoffs, we expected them to get past both RNG, JDG, and the whole question for a lot of people was between WE and FPX. That didn't happen because of JDG's just surge. Man. Now, the concern that I had going into this split, and the reason why I rated WE so lowly was based off of just the two rookie talent coming into that team. And I just mean Pose and Beishang. Beishang had such a strong end to that split. But my concern is always that honeymoon period. That when teams start, and specifically enemy junglers, start to really track your gameplay, understand your motivation and what you're working with, then they can start picking you apart. A lot of the times when a new aggressive jungler comes through, it's easy to rally behind. But when you start to really pick it apart through footage, that's, finally you get to see a little bit more of this jungler, you're like, actually, he's just doing this without much support at all. He's doing this on his own, and he's hoping that he doesn't get caught out. And right now, when you saw that LNG series, Beishang got caught out a lot by SOFM. Went in early for an early invade, got pushed back, tried to go in for a mid lane push. Of course, thought he had river pressure. Duan and SOFM got a kill on him, just pushed him out consistently. And then even when they had one window, I think the Team WE had Baron buff in this series, tried to push in. And Beishang just kind of wandered into Fog of War when they could have just stuck in lane to siege on mid lane inhibitor turret. And these are just moments that you see so consistently from inexperienced talent that comes through. And Beishang showed to really us, of course, when it comes to strength and talent. He is a strong individual player, but you need to be able to have experience underneath that. That's something that WE's been lacking pretty heavily since Condi. Now, that's unfortunate. The WE hasn't had that. And right now are in a position where I think they should still keep the Beishang. But the reality of the fact right now is that they need to find experience. And experience comes with time. If they can't find that jungler outside, then stick with Beishang and really just wait. Work with them. Build them. Then you can create a new dynasty within your own team. That, let's say in the future, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, if Mystic is gone, Beishang is gone, you'll be the team known for having Mystic and Xie, that is gone. You'll be the team that's known for having like Beishang. And if you have a system in play, of course, you can have one of the strongest junglers in the league. But as it stands, he is exploitable. And then from that point, you could even see mistakes from Pose within the lane. Pose is going to take those 1v1s. You saw it happen. He's losing them. So, at the moment in time, I think Xie and Mystic are surrounded by greener players that have a pretty heavy hand in the stake of the early game. Mystic and Xie pretty much wait for the late game religiously. They just rely on the fact that if they can get to those late game team fights like the old WE days, that they can win out. And I think they have reason to believe that. But that's not the meta. That is not the meta whatsoever. They're following the RNG game plan. Except with RNG, they have Karsa. Now they have Langsing. And even in that respect, Xiaohu doesn't play until late game. Xiaohu really does focus on the early mid game. He is the bridge, while in Team WE, Xie is getting shoved in or needs time and can't commit to skirmishes. So they do not run skirmish in their composition. I think it's really hurting Team WE. So I think Team WE is a position where they're going to be struggling. Now, the last 4 series that they have in this playoff in their run, I think because they got hit once again with a tougher beginning of schedule. But the last 4 series is Vici Gaming, LGD, Rogue Warriors, Victory 5. So they can make that deep run to the end. It's always a question. This is one of those teams. Team WE is a team that you do have to track at the very end of the split, just based off of strength of schedule alone. It sucks talking about Rogue Warriors and talking about them in that context, but it's just the situation. I want to see what that team looks like going forward. But now that I got those 2 teams out of the way, 3 if you count LGD, let's start talking about my point on the LPL, because I've alluded to it at the very beginning. I said at the very beginning of this episode that I thought that this split 100% is one of our strongest splits in history. Because in the LPL, we've had splits like 2016, 2015, where you were pretty damn top heavy. You had 2 teams that you can throw internationally and you knew they would do well. You get to the 3rd and 4th team, you're certainly getting to questionable boundaries where they have a specific style. And their style is, they hit that. And by style, I mean they fight. But everything else, they kind of fall forward in. But I think by the end of the year, we're going to have our most competitive and not even just competitive. I think this is just going to be the most talented gauntlet we're going to have in history. Because I think competitive, going back on that point, I think that's going to be a contentious point because what happened in 2016. 2016 LPL Gauntlet was the most entertaining one to watch. Let's actually throw it up in here. 2016 LPL regional tournament. Because that was the one that saw to... what's going on here? Did I get the wrong one? Yeah, I think I did. But yeah, 2016 regional gauntlet that decided the third seed had... First of all, there were 3 matches. Snake versus Vici went to 5. Then Snake versus WE went to 5. And, W ended up winning that one. That one was the finals where IMA versus Team WE capped off in the most ridiculous Hollywood montage-esque moment where you had Game 5 decided in some ultra late game deep dive that people will remember it for. And I think you can't take much away from 2016 in terms of the entertainment value and how close those teams really were. But 2019 Gauntlet is going to be just your most talented teams, not only because the LPL being the deepest region at the moment in terms of talent and team strength, but also just because of the fact that I feel like a lot of these teams are getting to get together. So let's take a look at right now our top 6 teams. Top 5 is really all that matters here, because you're never going to have that extra series that you saw in 2016. So if we're just talking about teams that will get the first 2 tickets at Worlds and the third one, you have Invictus Gaming. You knew that this championship team will come back together. There's not a concern about that. IG, RNG, EDG, FPX, LNG, Top Esports, JD. I'm even going to be throwing in JD because JD was a team, kind of reminds me of Gen G at this point, where they had that huge run last year. Didn't make it. Couldn't do it. Last split, people counted them out. They made that deep run. And even though people remember how the finals looked, I'll certainly remember how the team looked coming into it. That they looked like they weren't too concerned by the end of losing Loken, right? They lost Loken. At the end, seems like Imp was able to fill those shoes. And Imp's career was rejuvenated based off that alone. So JD certainly has to be put into the equation because much like the whole point that I made about Gen G, I think they're a team of late bloomers. Then when they get to the gauntlet time, they're ready for it. So you never know where they're going to be landing. And of course, they have the most championship points. And then you moved on to Top Esports. Top Esports has the best mechanical mid laner right now in the world, being Knight. Knight is just such a fantastic talent that is now on a competitive team. It's kind of one of those stories when you hear about, Apto coming in, Team Dark, that situation that ensued, or Faker's initial debut, and of course was able to rock the league. And you finally get that talent this generation in Knight, and you know what's going to last. And it's so fun to be able to see him be able to start his career out on Suning, come back on Top Esports, and have a team built around him where he is a primary focus, has Loken on the bottom side of the map. Hopefully 369 and XX can shape up throughout the split. The experience is certainly needed because they are also top tier talent in their position. Top Esports is an insane team that just need the added experience. And the coaching staff, Crescent, also known as BSYY, is a major, major reason for that growth. And I think that they're going to get to that point because of him. So, and then you have LNG. Holy shit. Out of nowhere. LNG as a team, adding in Plex and Dwan, already having consistency on the top side of the map is something that I was really surprised about, that both SOFM and Flandre are playing consistently on top of their game, that there isn't that kind of lapse in focus that you would see from SOFM in the early portions where he just kind of throws himself in the mid lane and loses. That's not a concern anymore. And I feel like regardless of the communication blockades that happen because you have Plex, the Korean import coming into the team, he is just mechanically so strong. And much like our discussion about LGD not having top tier junglers in their history, It's been this case for Snake since losing Zatai in the mid lane. That team did not have top tier mid lane talent. Plex could be that. Plex is competitive against the top tier. So certainly just time is what's necessary before we can throw him onto that pedestal. And already I'm happy with what we're seeing from LNG. The amount of coordination that they have. Like being able to bring in Asura, and of course last split he was playing well, but they just needed a great facilitating role around him. And Tuan has experience, whole host of experience, working alongside Dandy and Vici at that time, and was really the only strength of Vici was he was on it. This was before that they had Puff and Southwind very easily. I can make that point. And the Vici of old was just poor. Unfortunate to watch. And Dwan was really the saving grace of that. So now you have a great amount of experience throughout your roster, a good amount of talent in Plex and Asura that will only grow. LNG is a team that will find themselves in the gauntlet, hopefully. I really do hope, because they don't have the points in spring, and you got to believe that they'll be making up for that in this playoff time. And then from that point forward, those are the 3 teams that could make out your gauntlet, can fill it out. And the 4 teams that you'd at least have in that whole contest is, of course, Invictus Gaming, RNG, EDG, FPX. Those are your front runners. Those are the teams that you look at and you say, these are going to be your world's representatives. And who do we think is actually going to be booted out of group stage of these events? Because now that's the question. Because if we're comparing this to the heyday of 2016 China regional finals, IMA won that, went on a Worlds. Their group stage was a mess. You could say the same thing if Team W went over there. Team W had their equal faults. While they dominated the early game in Game 5 versus IMA, their early games were poor. Their early games, they didn't care too much about it. And then in team fights, they got out team fought by, IMA. People will look back on that period and say that Team WE would have performed better internationally, but I think that's just really, really difficult to call for. And at the end of the day, LPL as a region was pretty damn close to Europe in terms of performance. North America, certainly, with how Cloud9 performed at that moment. And so, at that time, third seed was far weaker than we could ever imagine it being now. Now, 2019, we have 3 teams that should very easily make it to the quarterfinals, the first round in Worlds. That kind of all comes down to how EDG look, because everybody, if EDG ends up making it over there, people start to put questions on that. Remember, EDG got knocked out this time round to the eventual finalists in Fnatic, and people were already pretty high about Fnatic after the group stage. But that was a pretty competitive series that they had. And then EDG also took down Team Liquid in a pretty convincing fashion. Group C, I believe it was, the one that had EDG, KT. That was a damn good group to watch and see strengths that EDG had. So I think we're in a position where the LPL is so stacked. You feel bad for the 5th team. Because when you think the 4th team, you're like, shit. 4th team, you almost made it. You went to the finals of the gauntlet, right? You got to that point and you just fell flat. But the 5th team had no chance. The 5th team was the one you're like, man, I could go to that international event and I would kill it. But right now, I'm over here and I can't deal with these teams. I can't do it. And just for discussion's sake, I think a lot of people will look back at the last gauntlet and say that was pretty tough. Or let's actually just go through some of these gauntlets just to kind of be able to iron out some of these discussions, because I think 2016 was the most exciting one. 2017, let's say 2018. Now, 2017, of course, had OMG, IG, WE. That's, come on now. IG versus WE was a very, very good gauntlet finals, and eventually WE went and did amazing things at Worlds. So people will look at that and say, okay, well, that deals their international conversation, right? But that was in no way a deep pool. IG was coming into this event with West, remember, and they had that core weakness in their consistency at the bottom side of the map. And on top of that, they couldn't even get challenged in the first round because OMG was debilitated. They were coming into this event, sure, thinking that they were fourth best or fifth best in the region, losing SMLZ in the fashion that they did. Like, you can't just lose a rising star like that. Not even rising. Just a flat out star. So OMG came into that one basically amputated. They were a competitor without a leg. And you never want to see that happen. Essentially, you came into a gauntlet with two teams that were fighting for it. Same can be said in 2018, because this one, actually, the finals was the one where you expected it to be easier. And JDG came on that huge deep run, lost to Invictus Gaming in the semifinals in a Game 5 in Invictus Gaming. That was their championship run, of course. Going to the gauntlet, remember, they came in a weak spring split, came in strong as summer split, so they had to start at the very beginning of that gauntlet run, lose to EDG when EDG made their burst, and of course the finals was the easier portion. So once again, two strong teams, and in this case, Rogue Warriors was the actual weaker team. But now you're coming into a potential gauntlet where you have 6 teams that are on top of their game. 4 of those teams are going to be fighting for it. And you feel bad for everybody involved. I'm going to say this. I just feel bad for LNG. LNG are coming in a position much similar to JD of 2018, where it doesn't matter how good they look right now. Very similar to Griffin, actually, last year. You need to make a deep run. You need to prove that you are the best if you want to go far. You need the points, and LNG is in a position while they look fabulous. Holy shit. You need to make semifinals, finals. Like, you need to be there if you want to find yourself in the gauntlet. So, good luck to them. But honestly, if you're a fan, please watch. Because this is as good as the LPL has really gotten in terms of internal competition within the league. And while we may still have Victory 5 and Vici, that's just going to be a constant with any competitive league. We have 16 teams, and our top 8 are playoff teams. You have to fight to be able to make it. So that says a lot. So the history right now, this is going to make history. And that's my point ultimately, is that this is one of our historic splits that we'll look back on and say that, Jesus, I can't believe this is the iteration of EDG that, like, let's say, theoretically, didn't make it to Worlds, or that we look back and saw an LNG that had resolved everything and still couldn't make that final leap. Or Top Esports with Knight seemingly at his peak competition. Of course, he has a whole bunch of years left on him, but you never know if he's going to be on the same team with the same caliber of teammates. That 369, Knight, XX, Loken, that this kind of a team, alongside Ben, if they don't make it, and let's say in the future they get busted up, moving the pieces around, and they find success elsewhere, you're like, shit, that's crazy. That in the year 2019, this team couldn't make it to that international and be able to perform that we kind of expected them to. So, kind of look towards that. I think the final weeks of this split will be something that I will really, really hold dear. Now, okay, let's talk about upcoming matches. Matches that I'm excited for. I alluded to earlier on, Invictus Gaming versus Top Esports, going to be on Saturday. Yeah. Holy shit. IG versus TOP now. Even, let's just make the assumption that Rookie's not playing, and it's Forge versus Knight. I'm still pretty excited about it. There's a lot to be excited here for Invictus Gaming. Invictus Gaming had their first real series versus EDG, where their jungler performed as strong as I remember in Spring Split. Ning didn't look like a scrub. In no way did he not. In fact, Ning came in like a top-tier jungler versus EDG. He matched the competition. I expected... Look, my initial vote on who would win versus EDG and Invictus Gaming, I thought IG was going to win, because even with EDG's current strength, Like IG still has all the tools necessary, and they play up to the competition. But the reality is, of course, that Rookie couldn't make it. Baolan had to play a single game up until that point. And so they would come in more than flat-footed. They would be walking on charcoal. And I felt like they came into that series with a huge handicap. And the players around them, Baolan and Ning, players that actually performed incredibly poorly during the Team Liquid series, actually had strong games. And remember, this is actually the most important point about this now going into the top sports game, is that the whole conversation of best top laner in the world going into MSI was stationed around the Shy with ease. That the Shy was the most mechanically gifted top laner, was by far the best in the world. And so, of course, if an international event comes through and the Shy's in it, the Shy's going to play well. Of course he's going to dominate. And then he goes to MSI during during the group stage. Of course, doesn't perform well. I'm like, what the hell? There's that whole happy game idea where they weren't trying. They weren't putting in 100. His Kennen game where he runs it down and has like 7 deaths. You're like, hopefully during the first best of 5, of course he comes out and shows his strength. And even then, of course, they just have one of their worst best of 5s I've ever seen of that iteration of that team. In fact, I'd say it's the worst. You've never seen Invictus Gaming come out and play as poorly as they did. Now, people will remember Ning and Baolan for how they performed on that one, but the Shy never really made up for what he did during the group stage. So now we had a discussion about who's our best top player in the world, and people, reasonably so, will not put the Shy on the map for that. That they'll easily talk Wonder up, as they should. And, we'll go through a few other top laners. I'll say easily Impact actually comes into mind now. Before they talk the Shy. And if you bring respect to the Shy's name, it's because of what he did in the past rather than what he did recently. And finally, recency hit him, being able to dominate the series versus EDG. He picked the Ryze versus Renekton matchup, which is heavily in favor of him. But my God, did he just actually play out those team fights well. So you got to see the Shy to speak on that one. Finally able to see him take over a series as you saw him in Spring Split. And you need to be able to see that happening. So it says a lot going into the future. I think going up against top esports, once again, you have a top side focus for Invictus Gaming. Like the semifinals that we saw versus those two teams, I would like to see 369 and XX challenge that instead of playing away from that. I think that was a crucial mistake that they made last time around. That when they were challenged at their strength and saying, hey, you know what, top esports, we won a whole host of our series in the regular season based off of playing through top side. Well, actually, how about we play through bot side this time around and put 369 on an island for the first series he's ever been in, right? What the hell? I have never been more surprised as I was in that series at the way they played. It made no sense to me. Actually, the finals made more sense than that one did. And then they start bringing Moyu in, and Moyu performing better. It was crazy to see. Of course, I understand rookies being put in a stage like that under immense amount of pressure with the scrutiny of the fans. That'll change the way you play, and that'll change the way you view yourself against players like the Shy. But you need to be able to match those situations head on, because you never know what that'll turn into. You playing towards topside doesn't mean you're going to be exactly the same, even though you'd see Top Esports as a team formed similarly with a similar idea of Invictus Gaming. Like, at the end of the day, you guys are still more gank focused. XX going towards topside around Renekton. Like, those are the... If you challenge those 2v2s... In fact, Invictus Gaming lost when they were challenged in 2v2s on topside because of how consistently, when pressured, Ning cracked. And I think that they needed to be able to recognize that, but at that time they had failed. I think this time around they'll come out and perform a little better, especially under the circumstances Invictus Gaming is under. I still give Invictus Gaming the edge in this series because at the end of the day, you have Jackie Love, Baolan's back, and I think Ning performs much better under those circumstances when he has a support he can play through and have confidence in. This time around, it's there. Jackie Love has turned himself into, to me, he has the aura of a hardened veteran. Even coming in his second year, he's a player that has performed the most consistently for the team in MSI. He's come back into the league and performed, aside from that dominance game in which he got hit by every Lux Q, he's come out and performed like a baller. He has been stellar in the games that he's been coming out in. So I easily have Jackie Love as a major focus in this series going up against Loken. And I think right now, Invictus Gaming will be able to take that. I'll say 3 games. It goes 3 games. It's not going to be as dominant as we saw it as in the past, but certainly something that looking forward to. You give more respect to IG after the EDG victory. And then the match of the week. The match you guys should be paying attention to. FPX versus RNG. Finally, the 2 biggest teams in this league right now. Undefeated in all. Both of them actually losing. Let me actually take a look at RNG for 1 second, because both teams would have had perfect game records. Would have been 9-0 for RNG, actually 8-0 because they wouldn't have gotten to that extra game, and 10-0 for FPX if it wasn't for LGD. So, our undefeated teams go up against each other. Right now, our strongest looking teams go up against each other before the Rift Rivals break. I'm pretty excited for that one. This should be the best quality series of the split. Even with Invictus Gaming in there, EDG in there, this will be the series you need to watch. They're actually incredibly similar in not just their style of play, but more their mentality. Team fights, skirmishes is what you should be expecting at all stages. I know if I go into this cast, I'm going to be leaning more on my play-by-play and kind of drawing excitement, because that's what this series comes down to. Uzi versus LWX, Duumbi versus Xiaohu, Gimgoon versus Long Sing. There's actually just so many matchups that you look towards and you say, like, Tien versus Karsa, that you pick apart. Even I'm not confident with my pick coming into this one. I forget because on the LPL team, the English casting team, we have our predictions. My God, I forgot who I predicted for this one. But, jeez, I can't even go back on it. Because I don't even remember what it was. But I'll say FPX. I think FPX, as it stands, even after their 1-game loss versus LGD, their strength through 2v2 mid, having strong side bottom lane, and Gimgoon largely being on the weak side, they are the most flexible team. While they have a pretty ironed out focus on how to play their early mid game, in drafting, I have never seen a more flexible team in draft. It's never happened. They do it to a point where they tend to experiment with what happens when they leave up the Aatrox. What happens if they value the Kennen, right? If they put up Kennen, is Kennen truly just going to simply be a top lane pick? They're willing to put that mid. What they're willing to do in draft, I have never seen in a team in my life. Even with G2, the champions, coming out and really making a meta for AP bots once again, Pyke in every position except for jungle. That's a crazy discussion to see from your champions, your MSI champions. But FPX, really, you have no idea what you're dealing with, even with what you see with the Kennen picks. So from draft, they have an edge. In game, they have an early game edge, kind of, just because of how they draft and how they focus through mid jungle. And then I just think that they have naturally aggressive and disciplined players recently. And the discussion around LWX versus Uzi, I think, is going to be a weird discussion to have. Because LWX as a player, just going to talk about him a little bit. He's a player that just doesn't get much, if any, recognition. And it's one of those situations where, you're called underrated so much until you become overrated because everyone's calling you underrated. But LWX as a player still have never been in that top 3 discussion. When you talk top 3 AD carries, people always find their way into like Uzi, Jackie Love, SMLZ, iBoy. Those are 4 players that just kind of get swapped around your top 4s. And LWX is left at your number 5, number 6, depending on the performance of, let's say, Jin Zhao, Loken, Zhang Wuji, but I don't think he's hit that just yet. That would be my take. So I would say he's always hit top 5 AD carry. Mystic is another player that you look at and you're like, of course, Mystic's in your top 3. So holy moly, right? Like top 5, top 6 is where, he's put into immediately. But this has been the split, because if our criticism come towards for LWX, because we need to start updating what his weaknesses are, because I don't see as many anymore. Because at the beginning, when he first came out in the LPL, he was highly explosive. Someone who's always looked for a way to get into a fight. But certainly when he got challenged in those large team fight moments, 40 minutes into the game, he makes that crucial flash forward, kills himself. A lot of people will kind of make the example of like Wild Turtle in the past. Like that's something you make a comparison to. He's not even that player anymore. He's greatly improved in his discipline and patience throughout the game. I think a lot has to do with the facilitators he has around him. He has confidence in the players around him. He doesn't need to be able to make that play like he did when FPX was there or Newbie when he was on that team. He can play it slower, and he's really kind of taking that into consideration. So for me, LWX is, as a player, I look at and I say he has the mechanics, he has the discipline, he has the veteranship that you've seen in him. He's played in a lot of teams and for a while now. I don't see a weakness. And if I compare him to Uzi, who he's going up against, I think while Uzi has the edge, I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough of an edge to be able to say that there's a matchup difference. And I think current team fighting, I would favor FPX only because they've been together consistently throughout the year, that they've had that full split together. Well, I still think right now, current issue with RNG is that Karsa, Shahu, and Long Sing still need to be able to formulate a good top side. And when I say good top, I mean like literally world-class top side, that they have enough time together to be able to iron that out and understand, like, let's say if Long Sing's on the weak side of the map, he's still a person who's willing to make those plays, but the success rate to that is it's pretty high in terms of whether he's willing to do that, but he's not willing to take the complete L. He still wants to be able to pull in pressure, and I think that currently the team is in a position where I still don't see an ironed out focus or games, like a style of play. It kind of reminds me of what I saw during the regular season of Spring Split. They play through Xiaohu, they go to top side, they help out, and throughout all of this, Ming and Uzi don't really get too much of the pressure, play what you would expect and what you would want out of a fan. They play weak side, get a little bit more pressure from Karsa, and then in team fights time, they put in a lot of DPS, and they put in far more efficiency in the goal that they're getting. But then during big moments like playoffs, they change that. They put it on a dime. They put their top laner on complete weak side and put as much focus on as they can into the bottom side of the map, and they go back to that core weakness that they've had in the past. So I think RNG still needs to iron out what style they want to play with a new look of the team that they had. That's something that I want to see from RNG. But I think this game goes to 3. I think FPX has the team coordination and synergy. They have a game plan, how they view the game to be played, completely ironed out. They don't have weak links on the map either. Every member on this team is a strong point. So this is our best match of the regular season. Stay tuned for it. For me, that's episode 2 for the 2 series to watch. I have IG and FPX taking those series. Let's see what ends up happening, man. Throw in your predictions, what you have. Tell me why you think they're right. Tell me why you think I'm wrong. You're probably going to be wrong on that one, of course. And I'll see you guys for episode 3 coming out next week. Take it easy.